We've gone through this before in other episodes, but this segment bears another updated mention. Although Bezos and Musk are among the richest men in the world, at least on paper, and both of them have competing aspirations in space, there is one key difference between the two men and the two companies, and that difference permeates throughout both companies' modus operandi. That difference answers this question: where does the money for the company operations come from? Fans of Elon Musk are under the misguided impression that because SpaceX is a Musk company, that Musk finances the company out of his own pocket. Musk holds 42% of SpaceX shares that, through some form of corporate malfeasance, gives him almost double the voting power in this private company. A double-up scenario that he's just recently suggested he needs to have in Tesla before he'll deliver on long-standing AI and robotics claims. But this share structure in no way reflects the amount of money that Musk has personally put into the company. In the beginning, yes, Musk took a portion of his windfall from the sale of PayPal, thanks to Peter Thiel, despite Musk having nothing to do with the creation of nor development of the PayPal application, and despite being fired for incompetence within months of becoming the CEO for a very short period of time. When X.com, a failed financial platform, combined with Confinity, the company that created and developed PayPal, Musk was assigned an 11.7% share of the company, and that's where his money came from, $175 million and change, when Peter Thiel orchestrated the sale of PayPal to eBay after Peter Thiel took the company public. Musk did not make Musk rich. We have Peter Thiel to blame for that. Anyway, Musk took $100 million of that unearned payday and founded SpaceX with it, then burned through all of it developing Falcon 1. The company was in financial ruin when SpaceX finally managed to successfully launch the fourth Falcon test flight on September 28, 2008, thereby securing NASA funding for the program. And for that, Musk can thank SpaceX employee number 1, Tom Mueller. With the NASA blessing came Musk's ability to raise more funding through the venture capital community, and it is this trough of money that Musk has returned to time and time again over the years to keep the lights on at SpaceX. Despite Musk saying publicly, even as recently as April of 2023, that SpaceX would not need to raise further funding, SpaceX has taken in over $10 billion across 33 funding rounds from 85 different investors, with their first billion-dollar raise in 2015 from Google and Fidelity, when Musk started talking about taking the BFR to Mars and ridiculously suggesting warming up the entire planet using thermonuclear weapons, as he did in this segment on The Tonight Show with Stephen Colbert.
You sincerely think that we should go to Mars, like men and women should go to Mars.
Yeah.
Why do we want to go to Mars? It's uninhabitable. How long before we could turn Mars into someplace where we could live?
It is a fixer-upper of a planet.
How would you do that?
The fast way is drop thermonuclear weapons over the poles.
You're a supervillain.
Yeah.
NASA and many other actual scientists, by the way, have already torn that concept to shreds, especially when the plan Musk is talking about requires 10,000 nuclear bombs. So anybody wearing one of these t-shirts that says Nuke Mars really should have gotten a free hat with every purchase. Since getting a Starship to Mars has not happened, nor is it ever likely to happen, but Musk still needs to keep that money flowing into this bottomless pit. He continuously relies upon his legions of fans and sycophant YouTube channels to generate the hype required to keep VCs and angel investors interested in participating, despite the cost per company's share going through the roof. To give you an idea how ridiculous this valuation is, ULA, who has been NASA's go-to proven launch provider for 20 missions to Mars, carries all manner of payloads to all elevations of orbit, and recently successfully tested their new Vulcan Centaur rocket, who over the course of 15 years and over 600 launches with our Atlas program, with a 100% mission success rate, was recently rumored to be for sale for around $5.2 billion, which would be here on this graph. So whenever Musk blows up a launch pad or scatters a Starship across Hell's Half Acre, that is not his money he's set ablaze. And because it's not his money, he seems to have very little regard for it. Long story short, Musk needs to keep Starship in the limelight and keep that hype going, because he needs venture capital money to finance his operation. But Bezos does not. He doesn't need to stay in the limelight because he doesn't require the venture capitalists, because he is, in fact, financing his own space company himself. According to Crunchbase, where SpaceX has 85 investors, Blue Origin has 2, but 2 very important ones. They are NASA and the United States Space Force. Where Musk has burned through $10 billion of investors' money across 33 funding rounds, Jeff Bezos has taken $167.4 million in grants to develop contracts for NASA and USSF prior to December 3, 2021. So where does the rest of the money for the Blue Origin program come from? Quite simply, it comes from Bezos' own pocket. Since the company was founded in the year 2000, Bezos has personally ponied up in the neighborhood of $20 billion of his own wealth, selling off $1 billion worth of Amazon every year to fund activities, like developing the New Shepard and New Glenn spacecraft, alongside an array of engines, including the BE-7, BE-3, and the BE-4, a pair of which recently launched the ULA Vulcan Centaur into space on January 8, 2024, marking the first successful launch using American-made methane-fueled rockets. Because Bezos has not required outside funding sources, he hasn't needed to publicize every single minute detail of the vehicle or engine development, which means most of what has happened at Blue Origin has been perfectly fine happening behind closed doors. Now, getting back to the HLS timeline, to recap, when Kathy Lueders awarded SpaceX the sole HLS contract on April 16th of 2021, SpaceX had no full-scale mock-up of their HLS design and had not successfully landed a single test article without incident. When the GAO denied the protest in July of 2021, SpaceX had managed to land one empty test article, SN-15, which didn't explode, but did catch fire on the landing pad, and when the federal judge rejected the case being made by Blue Origin on November 4th of 2021, no further Starship test launches had been conducted, nor progress made. 3 weeks after the federal judge rejected the claim to reopen negotiations using a level playing field, Musk revealed through an email and tweet relayed on Thanksgiving weekend of 2021 that the Raptor program was facing a production crisis, and he recalled Hawthorne SpaceX employees on their Thanksgiving holiday weekend to address this newest existential crisis for the company. This was following the resignation of longtime 2009 SpaceX alumni Will Heltsley, Vice President of Propulsion, within a week of Lee Rosen, Vice President of Mission and Launch Operations, who left after 8 years. Colonel Rosen's right-hand man, Ricky Lim, the Senior Director of Mission and Launch Operations from the class of 2008, also turned in his keys. And several other SpaceX employees also headed down the road after they were able to vest their employees' stock at $560 per share prior to the 10-to-1 split. So there's some perfect examples of the outstanding management team that Kathy Lueders signed off on. Around the same time, a group of SpaceX employees wrote a letter to Chief Operating Officer Gwynne Shotwell because they were frustrated by the constant negative press Elon Musk was bringing to their program, identifying Musk as a distraction and an embarrassment, and calling for a public separation between the company and Musk's conduct, which included sexual harassment allegations. Those allegations stemmed from Musk offering a company flight attendant a horse in return for a handjob after getting a massage from her while aboard the company jet in flight. SpaceX wrote the woman a check for $250,000 to keep quiet on the matter. Small wonder the employees wanted more distance between themselves and their scandalous CEO. But rather than taking her employee concerns into consideration, Shotwell backed Musk and fired all her employees on the spot, despite some of these employees being department heads. 9 people, all told, were fired as a result of that letter of concern, and they immediately filed legal complaints in June of 2022. On January 3rd, 2024, the National Labor Relations Board found in the employees' favor, determining their firings were illegal and requiring SpaceX to settle the charges, likely by reinstating the employees and paying back wages. Failure to settle the charges will result in a hearing on March 5th of 2024. But the day after the NLRB ruling, on January 4th of 2024, SpaceX sued the NLRB over their decision, calling it unconstitutional, so this matter will remain before the courts. Just one more example of the outstanding management practices conducted at SpaceX. That was the state of the Starship HLS program going into 2022, a crisis with the Raptors, bankruptcy looming, top brass running out the door, and employees being illegally fired for speaking up on behalf of their company. Although Musk had promised his fan base that SN-15 would relaunch within days after landing and catching fire in May, SN-15 would not fly again and was ultimately scrapped. The next time a vehicle lifted off from Boca Chica, it was the infamous IFT-1 flight on April 20th of 2023, almost 2 years after SN-15. Now, during that time, what was Blue Origin up to? Well, for starters, on July 20th of 2021, in between the GAO determination and a federal court dismissal, Blue Origin launched their first manned New Shepard capsule atop its reusable booster powered by their own BE-3 engine, bringing 4 passengers to the edge of space to experience weightlessness at the apex of a 10-minute journey that crossed the Kármán line. Notably, Jeff Bezos and his brother Mark were both aboard for this inaugural manned flight, meaning Bezos trusted this machine enough to personally test it out, with his brother and 2 other people, Wally Funk and Oliver Damon. The flight from Launch Site 1 in West Texas was flawless, the landing of the booster perfect, the manned capsule landing on solid ground using a combination of parachutes and a last-second thruster burst before touching down. This was followed by a payload mission consisting of 18 commercial payloads in the crew capsule and a NASA lunar landing technology demonstration installed on the exterior of the booster. Further manned flights went flawlessly in October 21st with Captain Kirk himself taking part, then additional manned flights in December of 2021, March of 2022, June of 2022, and August of 2022. The next flight of New Shepard, an unmanned research mission in September of 2022, failed due to an issue with the BE-3 engine, but that event proved that the crew abort system, powered by Aerojet Rocketdyne, worked as intended by saving the capsule, quickly removing it from the incident, and landing it safely despite losing their booster. After a 14-month hiatus, while we were putting this series together, Blue Origin returned to space with the successful launch of NS-24, including the 9th recovery of this particular booster and the soft landing of their cargo capsule, carrying experiments for 33 different customers. While Bezos was proving out the abilities of New Shepard, in February of 2022, Musk gave a long overdue update on Starship. Musk had been promising a release of final Starship details and internal diagrams to his fanbase by the end of October of 2020. And at that time, Musk was saying SpaceX could launch their first orbital flight test by November of 2021. Of course, that never happened. The interior layouts have never been released for review, and as it turned out, Musk had very little to nothing to add in the 2022 presentation compared to the same style presentation that he did in 2019. Our episode on this event laid out how it was pretty much a point-for-point carbon copy of the 2019 presentation, with some minor details that only came out really during the Q&A. SpaceX had not even begun looking at interior designs or things like life support systems yet, despite Musk saying he planned on hijacking designers from Tesla for that purpose, in claims dating back to at least August of 2020. Musk was queried about this directly by Kevin Hare from SpaceX.
My viewers are really hungry to know anything about the interior design for crewed Starship. You have HLS, you have Dear Moon, and last we heard, maybe a year or 2 ago, you were looking to hire Tesla employees to design the interior for Starship. How's that going?
We aren't focusing a lot on the interior quite yet. I mean, that will be important down the road, but our focus right now is just getting to orbit and proving out return of the booster and return of the ship.
Another point that's very interesting from the 2022 presentation was brought up by Lauren Grush from The Verge.
I'm wondering if you can clarify the number of launches that you plan to conduct in order to do these refillings. I know a lot of numbers have been thrown around, so I'm wondering if you have landed on a final number, and how quickly do you plan to launch those missions back-to-back to refuel the vehicle to get to the moon?
The missions would happen pretty fast for refilling the vehicles to minimize boil off of the cryogenic propellants. But we'd probably be launching, every few hours.
Every few hours, he says. They'll be launching propellant tanker flights for the HLS headed to the moon. But even Kathy Lueders' glowing recommendation of the HLS paradigm had the launch rate, as per the SpaceX proposal, at 1 every 12 days. Demonstrating that when talking about Starship, Musk continually pulls numbers out of his thin hair. On April 20th of 2023, 23 months after the SN-15 launch and pad fire, SpaceX stacked Starship 24 atop booster number 7 and lit the fuse on what would become an ecological bombshell and vehicle disaster that laid waste to the Stage 0 facility and surrounding protected wildlife preserves, culminating in the loss of the vehicle only minutes into the launch. The disaster in the air and on the ground sparked a major investigation that will last for months, involving the FAA, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the state of Texas. This disaster also prompted a collaboration of local and environmental groups to file suit in federal court against the FAA and SpaceX, which, unless we missed an announcement somewhere, that legal action is still in motion. But in our opinion, the most notable outcome of this event was this. By May 19th, 2023, 1 month after Starship IFT-1 failed miserably at its attempt to get to orbit, NASA had figured out a way to bankroll a second lunar landing system for Artemis 5. And guess who they called? They went right back to Blue Origin's team, which now included Lockheed Martin, Draper, Boeing, Astrobotic, and Honeybee Robotics. Blue Origin's national team was awarded a $3.4 billion contract to double up on a SpaceX HLS program. And although their overall design from their previous concept underwent a complete do-over, once again, Blue Origin already has a full-scale mock-up delivered to NASA for review, comments, and suggestions, delivered in October of 2023. According to current timetables, the Artemis 5 craft would be headed to the moon no earlier than 2029. And the launch vehicle of choice now is the Blue Origin New Glenn rocket. Coincidentally, a New Glenn first stage was recently spotted outside the Blue Origin hangar at Cape Canaveral, with no big fanfare or need for public announcements. The image was captured by a drone over Cape Canaveral that was not expecting to see the vehicle being transported. And that's another thing worth noting about Blue Origin. They are developing their vehicles at a proper, established space facility in Florida, without having to destroy nature preserves and state parks. Another example of the Blue Origin team going about their work as normal, and obviously making progress towards their goals. For over 2 years now, we have referred to this competition between SpaceX and Blue Origin as a modern-day version of the Tortoise and the Hare. The Hare, Musk, being the loud, braggadocious, conceited competitor who feels the need to belittle his competition. Case in point is when Musk was referring to the Blue Origin lander in terms of sexual frustration, as a junior in high school might do. Then mocking Bezos again after Musk basically bought himself the bid for the initial HLS contract. Musk has been relying on an iterative development program to drive what was advertised as a quicker form of rocket development, while effectively turning Boca Chica, Texas into a pockmarked wasteland. That process is on constant display on YouTube, 24/7, thanks to channels like NASA Spaceflight, who speculate on every form of activity at both the manufacturing hub and the launch pad site. This particular stream has been running non-stop since July 12th of 2021. And unless we're mistaken, this looks an awful lot like repairs on the orbital launch pad that Musk announced was undamaged during IFT-2 at 2:30 in the morning. These video feeds catch every movement, every component, every explosion, and then those are rebroadcast by the likes of muskrats, like Zach at CSI Starbase, and Tim at Everyday Astronaut, who reportedly spent $250,000 in studio gear to specialize in Boca Chica launch activity videos after picking up stakes from Iowa and moving to Texas, only to have giant gaps of time in between anything worth covering, as environmental investigations take months to conduct after every explosion. Considering this Eric Berger article was from February of 2020, stating Musk at the time was driving hard towards an orbital flight that year, and 4 years later that still hasn't happened, it's fair to say the iterative process has not measured up to expectations. Blue Origin's Tortoise, on the other hand, is not interested in showing their machines off to the world until they've been engineered properly and are ready to go. And the motto at Blue Origin supports the slow and steady wins the race morality. Their motto is gradatum ferociter, step by step, ferociously, as seen here in the ribbon at the foot of the Blue Origin coat of arms. Notice anything else about that image that's interesting? These two characters here? Those are tortoises. Funny story, we were pretty shocked to find this article and this image from 2016 during our web search, and even more surprised that the reason why they're in the coat of arms is due to the tortoise and the hare fable, crossed with a sniper's credo that slow is smooth and smooth is fast. Up until a couple of days ago, we had never seen that crest, so coming across that was good for a laugh. Anyhow, that mentality is reflected in the stats for New Shepard. In 24 launches of that vehicle between October 19th of 2012 and December 2023, there were only 2 launches that had issues. In 2015, NS-1 had a successful launch, and the capsule reached its elevation, but the booster crashed on landing. And the other issue we covered already, the failure of the booster and activation of the emergency abort system in 2022. That failure has since been tracked down to the nozzle of the BE-3 engine overheating. The other 22 missions went off exactly as expected. So the expectation at Blue Origin for each launch is to have a successful mission. None of this icing on the cake crap for clearing the tower. At Blue Origin, success is the expectation, compared to Musk's mentality of success maybe, excitement guaranteed, a motto that has to make aerospace engineers cringe every time they hear it. It certainly leaves us wondering why Musk has been allowed to go on with this program as long as he has to date, without any apparent adult supervision. Now, as it turns out, Blue Origin, the Tortoise, is set to upstage Musk, the Hare, in a big way in 2024, by being the first of the 2 companies to deliver a satellite payload to Mars, with a contract they swiped right from underneath Musk's nose. NASA's mission, anagram ESCAPADE, for Escape and Plasma Acceleration and Dynamics Explorers, announced in March of 2020 that SpaceX would be launching the 2 ESCAPADE craft and the Psyche probe on the same Falcon Heavy launch in 2024. However, it was determined that Falcon Heavy would not have been up to performing both tasks on the same launch, so ESCAPADE was pulled from the manifest and Psyche launched earlier on October 12th of 2023 instead, leaving ESCAPADE without a ride. And on February 9th of 2023, NASA announced their intention to award the ESCAPADE mission to Blue Origin, giving the New Glenn rocket a Mars delivery mission on its maiden flight. Because ESCAPADE is a Mars mission with an 11-month delivery time, rather than the home and transfer orbit timing for craft taking 6 to 9 months, which for 2024 lasts from October 17th to about November 2nd, Blue Origin is provisionally looking at having this launch set to go for a window between August 6th and 15th. Funnily enough, NASA re-released that information a couple days after the disastrous outing from Starship IFT-2, which we dissected in detail shortly after both Starship and Super Heavy exploded several minutes apart after their early morning launch on November 18th of 2023, resulting in yet another FAA investigation, which is still underway as of the date of this release in February of 2024. So the current state of the 2 HLS programs can be summed up like this. Musk's Starship to date, after almost a decade of development and 2 failed attempts to reach orbit in April and November of 2023, has not proven the safety of their system, despite originally being required to deliver an HLS lander and launch system to NASA by 2025. Before that, they need to conduct a demo mission. Before that, they have to figure out how to conduct on-orbit refilling because the Starship cannot get to the moon without having those logistics in place. To do that, they still need to produce a Starship tanker design and a propellant depot design. SpaceX still has no full-scale mock-up of the HLS lander they plan on using, and according to Musk from the Starship Update 2022, they hadn't even started looking at the interior design or life support systems for that craft. In between FAA investigations, they continue to fly test articles that don't actually mimic the HLS lander, and to date they still haven't attempted to recover a single Super Heavy booster with the chopsticks, even before those craft blew up over the Gulf of Mexico. There is no plan to recover them with the tower, and that technology would appear to be key. In the meantime, there's another contract Musk has fallen well short of, and that's the Dear Moon private mission financed by on-again, off-again billionaire Yusaku Maezawa. First announced in February 2017 as a 2-person flight in a Crew Dragon 2 capsule, then reimagined and announced in September of 2018 using a BFR. That mission was supposed to go around the moon with a crew of 9 accompanying the billionaire in 2023, and of course that didn't happen, and it's been pushed off indefinitely past 2024. In our opinion, Maezawa should either demand a refund or accept that his money is gone, but we all know this is never happening, and that inevitable cancellation will probably hit Tim Dodd the hardest, as one of the longest-standing Musk disciples, who built his entire persona and YouTube following on Starship. So remember how we said before that Musk needs to keep generating hype around Starship using his sycophants and fanboys? This is a perfect example of a Musk hype machine that generated huge public interest in what he's doing, and built up the genius mythos that Musk thrives on. Yet when these same projects fail to come to fruition, they all die quiet deaths, and nobody ever calls Musk out on it. Musk has been promising the Starship BFR ITS MCT since 2015. He's been promoting it since 2016 as a Mars colonization vehicle. But after a decade of development and promises, this vehicle has not reached orbit. In comparison, the first test tank for New Glenn was created in 2021, about 2 years ago, and the methane-powered BE-4 rocket engine went through enough testing at ULA and NASA to be mounted to their Vulcan Centaur launch from January 2024. That proven engine is now set to go into mass production. So given their recent rate of progress, there is no reason to think the Blue Origin will have any issues meeting their target date. The New Glenn rocket with reusable booster that Blue Origin and NASA plan on using for the mission will be launching in August 2024 on that mission to Mars, giving Blue Origin 5 years to work out any issues that present on that launch before being called upon for Artemis 5. Meanwhile, the Government Accountability Office, remember them, the organization that backed Kathy Lueders' sole award of HLS to SpaceX, they released a report in November of 2023 that declares Artemis 3 is going to have to get pushed back to at least 2027. Two primary reasons are given, and to nobody's surprise, the current state of the Starship HLS program is the long pole on that mission. Issues with the Axiom pressure suits that NASA is renting from that company also need to be resolved, as the company remedies design issues from the specs NASA provided them to work with, specifically regarding emergency life support duration, but now that company has more than 3 years to work on it. Remember when Musk was asked directly about Starship readiness in the Tim Dodd Twitter Space interview, right after the IFT-1 launch? Here's the question and his response.
Do you expect HLS, Starship HLS, to be the long pole for Artemis 3?
No, I definitely don't. I think we will be the first thing to really be. I think we will be that we will not be a limiting factor at all.
Maybe if Musk was not so preoccupied with Twitter, he might be more aware of these schedule slips ahead of time. Which brings us to another big difference between Bezos and Musk, something Bezos brought up during his recent interview with Lex Fridman.
Blue Origin needs to be much faster, and it's one of the reasons that I left my role as the CEO of Amazon. Blue Origin needs me right now. And so I had always, when I was the CEO of Amazon, my point of view on this is if I'm the CEO of a publicly traded company, it's going to get my full attention. It was very important to me. I felt I had an obligation to all the stakeholders at Amazon to do that. And so having, turned the CEO, I was still the executive chair there, but I turned the CEO role over. And the reason, the primary reason I did that is so that I could spend time on Blue Origin, adding some, energy, some sense of urgency. We need to move much faster.
It would appear that having a full-time CEO that's involved and engaged might be beneficial to a company. But going back now to the GAO report, not only did the GAO gut any hopes of having a lunar mission in 2025, another report put out by NASA advisors recognizes that Musk was lying in his assessment that Starship would only require 4 to 8 launches to get the ship refilled in orbit for the trip to the moon. The analysis showed that close to 20 launches will be required, and that number will fluctuate a great deal depending on how the company intends to deal with boil-off of propellants while in orbit awaiting further refill. Boil-off is a natural evaporation process occurring within cryogenic liquids, and the vapors need to be vented to maintain the pressure and temperature within the propellant tanks. Direct sun hitting the side of a tanker in orbit would only accelerate this process on a tank that is not properly insulated, but insulation can only slow that process down. And the longer the ship is parked, the more propellant will be lost to boil off. These findings were right in line with the frame that Bezos submitted as evidence in his protest against the award to SpaceX. Muskrats were up in arms about this frame, saying Bezos was just making this up to create fear and doubt in the Starship system. Not realizing, of course, that this information was taken directly from the GAO's own filings, which were based directly from the SpaceX submission. And now there's no doubt remaining that this is the paradigm NASA has to deal with when using Starship for an HLS mission. As Bezos properly claimed on this frame, this architecture is immensely complex and high risk. Now, finally, the experts at NASA agree with him, which should make the panel at the GAO feel a little foolish for standing by the Kathy Lueders' assessment of the Starship HLS program. Speaking of Kathy Lueders, let's wrap up her story. As it turns out, after Lueders rushed through and signed off on the Starship HLS award, before Bill Nelson could take the helm at NASA in May of 2021, and doled out billions of dollars to SpaceX, even though, as the GAO reports, the company has made limited progress towards its goals. Lueders retired from her $250,000 a year salary at NASA in March of 2023, 3 weeks before the 420 Starship IFT-1 disaster. 3 weeks after Starship laid waste to Boca Chica, it was announced that Lueders had been hired by Musk to be the Starship program manager in Boca Chica, overseeing the very same multi-billion-dollar lunar landing project that she greenlit when she was still a government employee. Now it's her job to apologize to her former employer, while the company she chose for that contract suffers failure after failure. After IFT-2 blew up, twice, guess who had to stand in front of the press at the Brownsville Apology Tour, trying to spin that double disaster as a data-gathering success?
It is a very, very exciting time for us here at SpaceX. I'm going to talk a little bit about where we are today and where we want to be. And then obviously I'm going to bask in a little bit of the glow of Flight 2, because that was a phenomenal event for me. And being able to be on the edge of Sanchez Lot and being able to watch that launch was just a once-in-a-lifetime experience for me.
Can you tell us the main takeaways from the recent launch?
Oh, I kind of stepped through a lot of them. I mean, man, we were so happy that the 33 engines, everything went nominal trajectory. That always, you hear those words on the feed, you're just like, you love it, you know. Hot stage worked beautifully. Like I already said, I had my low ratios done. That the 6 engines on the Starship all lit and went. Its trajectory went well. So just being able to see that amount of improvement in, you know, the 5 months of getting the next vehicle ready to go, we were really, really excited. It really set us up then for the next phase. Basically, we proved out the booster, and the booster was successful on its second voyage. So that was pretty phenomenal.
From NASA sweetheart to Musk apologist in a matter of weeks. What a complete fall from grace. And 3 days after Lueders' first day at work at SpaceX, NASA found the money to award the second HLS contract to Blue Origin. How fitting will it be when Starship fails to meet the contract benchmarks with Kathy Lueders at the Starship helm, a failure that will completely tarnish a once remarkable aerospace career. For those people who think Lueders didn't rush the decision on HLS, who believe she actually made the right call and was well within her rights making the award, you need to consider this undeniable fact. The SpaceX HLS CGI, which is all it has ever been with no full physical form to date, relies on the cable crane we mentioned earlier to get people from the airlock of the vehicle to the surface and back. And if anyone thinks this airlock crane looks like a finished, usable concept, they need to give their heads a shake. Not only was this critical access system not fully worked out, the HLS that was awarded the contract contained no redundancy for when this system breaks down. What was achieved by both the Dynetics Alpaca and the contemporaneous Blue Moon vehicle with a ladder, neither of which required power or mechanics to run. The exact opposite is true on Starship. Something Lueders was made aware of by the selection evaluation panel, but she hand-waved it. Not only was there no redundancy built into the machine then, according to a recent NSF interview with people working on Artemis at NASA, there is still no backup plan for when that platform becomes inoperable.
Is astronaut training in y'all's purview, or how does that responsibility break down?
Yeah, so astronaut training, as you might imagine, is done mostly by Houston. That's where the astronauts are. They have a ton of facilities down there. So here's a great picture of learning how we're going to get to and from the surface using this elevator, which as the surface lead is a fascinating and also very It's a very complicated system. Well, not complicated. It's just it has to work. It's not what we did on Apollo. It's a new system. I think about this thing a lot, and luckily we're building full-scale mock-ups and testing it.
What happens? Like, Alicia, you live in New York. You ever been stuck in an elevator?
Yes.
Like
elevators break down here all the time.
So the way we manage that, and that this is a great example of needing to be able to pull the requirements up to the highest level possible, right? But we are very concerned, like you guys were just talking about, like we definitely don't want a stuck elevator on the surface of the moon, both because, especially for the first missions where we only send 2 crew down, there's nobody in the lander to help them get back up. But also we have very tight time constraints on certain portions of the mission, so you have to have the crew be able to get back inside the lander within a certain time frame. So what we ended up doing is we wrote what we call like fault tolerance and reliability requirements. The elevator still has to be able to work even if some sort of failure happens, or you need to be able to meet a certain like reliability metric that there's only like a very tiny percentage of a chance of the overall system failing, and you kind of grade that with like test data and analysis data and all sorts of things. Because the core need is for the crew to be able to get back in the lander. We specify those higher level things like the fault tolerance or failure tolerance and the reliability.
Could you put in a ladder too? Or something like that, like a mitigation?
A slide, maybe?
A slide, yes.
In layman's terms, because there's no physical redundancy for this elevator, these 2 NASA leads on Artemis told SpaceX, instead of making the elevator good, we need you to make it like really, really good instead, to cut down on the odds of it breaking, which, given the reputation Musk has regarding overall quality control, is probably not a wise move. Kathy Lueders for the L for signing off on the only lunar lander of the bunch that decided to put the solitary access point for it 30 meters above the ground. Something Logan said here as a throwaway has a lot more gravitas than he gave it.
It's not what we did on Apollo.
It's not what we did on Apollo. And that is going to bring us to the final segment of the series.